Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Anastasia Khawaja. I use she, her pronouns, and I am currently sitting in Tampa, Florida at the University of South Florida in the United States. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So today I am thrilled to be discussing demystifying the academic publication process, breaking it all down to set a foundation for success. I am at University of South Florida. I am a senior instructor of English and also an adjunct professor of English, again, at the University of South Florida. I want to begin my presentation, as I begin all of my presentations, with the land acknowledgement. As I presently sit on the traditional homelands of the Tocobaga, Calusa, and Seminole peoples. Today, Florida is home to the Seminole, Miccosukee, and Muscogee and Choctaw groups. Individuals of other Native groups likewise reside here. I wish to recognize the historical and present impacts of colonization, violence, and displacement on Indigenous communities here and in other places. So today I am thrilled to be discussing the publication process and breaking it all down and discussing everything from the abstract to the conclusion and the introduction. And yes, there is a reason why I am saving the introduction for last, and we'll be discussing that towards the end. So the reason why we are talking about this today is that I have had the pleasure of being able to review a lot of different manuscripts and papers from students to scholars who are coming from around the world. And what I'm finding, what a lot of other people are finding, is that the ideas that are coming out are rich and innovative and incredible, but they're not getting disseminated. They're not getting published, mainly because of this English barrier, because a lot of publications, if not most publications, are in English. And if you don't have a strong foundation in English, and also an understanding of how the publication process works in English-related or journals, then you are at a disadvantage where you're not going to be able to get your work out there. So I am partnering with different journals and different editors to be able to bring different manuals and videos and helpful hints, and to be able to work hopefully with international scholars one-on-one to be able to give you the tools to get your really important work out there. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the abstract. Now, the abstract is probably going to be the very last thing you'll write, just like the introduction. But the abstract is basically a snapshot of your work. It's a snapshot of your study. And it's usually broken down to about 6 to 7 sentences, 150 to 250 words. You want to look at the big picture. You want to understand the gap that you're trying to address. You want to show how your paper is going to fill that gap and discuss what materials you're going to use. At the very end, you want to talk about the general results as well as the implications for your readers. So in other words, what are they going to take away from this paper by sitting down and by reading it? Again, it's a snapshot, and they should be able to have a pretty good understanding of your study at the end of your abstract. All right, so because we're going to talk about the introduction last, we're going to jump right into the literature review. Now, the literature review can be a complicated animal. As I've worked with a lot of international scholars and students, the lit review is the thing that gives them a lot of trouble, in addition to some domestic students as well. Because you have to review the past research and you have to cite that research properly. And then you have to be able to articulate how your idea fits into the existing research. So I have a kind of a do and don't list for you. And I talk about crafting your literature review. And I say crafting, as do a lot of other people, because the more studies that you read, and we'll go ahead and we'll use a puzzle because my 6-year-old loves puzzles. Every study that you have, every study, you bring another piece of the puzzle. And by the end of your lit review, you should have a completed picture in front of you where you understand where all the studies have come together to be able to better justify your own research gap and your own idea. So read widely. It is so important to read as widely as possible, and then categorize your studies carefully. Understand the different themes that your idea brings, but also understand what themes have inspired your idea in the first place. So it's really important to be able to read widely. You want to be able to justify your gap. When you are reading widely, it is really important to keep track of your key words. You need to understand what keywords work. You want to understand what keywords may not yield as many studies. And you want to be able to keep track of each study question, the methods, results, and implications. And I do this in a chart form. I don't write complete sentences. I just do some bullet points. This can help me to synthesize and put my ideas together in that discussion section. It saves you a lot of time, again, if you keep track of your studies in either a PDF or printout. Nowadays, everything is digital. So unless you print out all of your articles, having kind of a folder in your desktop or on your laptop or on your USB drive that's accessible with a Word doc that has a chart where you can keep track of all of these different studies will be very helpful. In addition to that, having a separate doc that keeps track of your entire reference is also going to be really helpful. Now, there are a lot of different citation machines to help you with this, but they are not always 100%. So it's always a good idea to just keep track of all your citations, either in a citation machine or on a Word doc. I love a good old-fashioned Word doc because it's editable and it's right there. And I also can edit it carefully to make sure that I'm not making mistakes in italicizing and capitalization and punctuation, because the citation manual, whether it's APA or MLA or Chicago or the like, are very exact and they are very specific. All right. The next thing to always make sure that you do is you want to review the studies critically and compare and contrast the findings among each other. The more you're able to compare and contrast what they have in common, the similarities and the differences, the better chance you'll have to solidify explaining your own research gap. And you want to choose studies which will help you to better solidify your research gap. But you don't want to be subjective. You don't want to give opinions. And you also don't want to include studies that do not contribute to your research topic. Now, that doesn't mean to only choose studies that will support your topic. You want to make sure that you include studies that include a wide breadth of knowledge and a wide breadth of perspectives and ideas. You don't want to shy away from those studies that may not support or might be semi-contradictory to your own work or to your own research. Those studies are going to help to enrich your own study and will also help a lot when it comes to limitations, et cetera, which we will also talk about a little bit later. Also, again, do not forget to cite all sources properly, be they are quotations or they are paraphrasing. You need to make sure that you cite all sources properly. All right, so once you have your lit review and you've solidified your research gap, now it's time for the methodology and the results section. Now, your methodology section is the section where you should be able to write down exactly what you did and how you conducted your study, which means your reader should be able to read the methodology section and be able to duplicate that work. You want to include your participants, you want to include your location, you want to include general background. And then what I like to do with the methodology is I like to organize it by research question and how I am going to analyze my data. I'm not going to give my results yet, but I'm going to discuss how my data is going to be analyzed. Sometimes I can do that in a chart form, especially if I have a mixed method study where I'm dealing with quantitative data and I'm dealing with qualitative data. Sometimes it's just simple prose. Once you have written your methodology section, you want to make sure that you have your results section in a very clear and concise manner. The results section is only for your results. Okay, you want to make sure you're not evaluating, you're not explaining, you're not arguing, you're not commenting. There's time for that in the next section, the discussion and implication section. And that is going to be the section that might take the longest time to write and to explain and kind of put together. And then finally, of course, in the results section, this is where you can add your charts, your tables and figures, make sure they're clear, make sure they are not overused, and also make sure that they are explained. You do not just want to plop a chart or a table in there and think that that is going to be self-explanatory. You want to make sure that you foreground it with an introduction, you have your chart or your table, and then you want to point out the key ideas that you want your readers to pay attention to the most. That will also help you as you move into your discussion and implication section. The discussion section is probably one of my favorite sections of the research paper because I get to show my readers, my reviewers, or whoever is reading my paper, how my study fits into the existing literature. I get to make my case for my study to be part of the research conversation. So I have here synthesizing and etching your space in the research conversation, because it really is truly a conversation, isn't it? The more that we read, the more presentations that we engage in with each other's work, we're going back and forth in conversation with our findings and our ideas, and we take them in new and different directions. And so when you write your paper, when you contribute your knowledge, you are contributing to that important conversation. So this is where you highlight the key findings. You relate your findings to past research. Acknowledge your limitations, absolutely, but show how your research belongs in the conversation. And the way you can do that, the easiest, is to be able to produce implications. How can people use your results? What do these results mean in practical terms? How can we use those ideas that you're bringing to light in whatever field, in whatever topic? And of course, coming to this conference, I see there are so many important topics to look at and so much important work happening. So how are they able to be, so how are the findings that will be practically implied is going to be crucial for your reader to understand. Again, do not include studies that support only your results. Do not focus on your limitations. Again, they're not negative. And you don't want to overgeneralize or overreach your findings. You want to make sure that you're able to discuss ideas and key findings that you can back up your claims on. So really quickly with limitations in future research, when you're talking about limitations, again, as I said, they're not negative. You want to identify them before your reviewers do. So when you're going through the publication process and you have these different reviewers, you want to acknowledge the different places where your studies might have fallen short, like size and generalizability are the most common limitations to studies. And then you want to use your future research directions to offer possible solutions as you move your ideas forward in new and possibly innovative ways. So you want to be able to show your reader that, yes, this is my idea, these are my findings, this is my discussion, these are the implications. Oh, but the conversation isn't over yet. We can continue in this direction and in this direction. And sometimes that helps to take care of some of the limitations that you mention in your limitation section. So the conclusion can be a pretty daunting area, especially because after you've done all of the work, a lot of times people say, well, how do I end it? Or sometimes beginning scholars, international scholars, and other students of mine just basically forget the conclusion section. They finish a discussion section and limitations, and here's my future research and the conclusion. So the conclusion is the very last part that will be read. It will be the last thing the reader will remember. You want to make sure simply that you just restate the topic, the argument, the key findings, and then your final thought. Your final thought, make sure it's memorable, but make sure it's not out of nowhere. Make sure it's not, as we would say, out of left field. Make sure that it can be connected. Make sure that the reader can connect to it without thinking that it's not somehow related to your whole study. That's one of the biggest pitfalls of a conclusion, is that you might have such a great idea, but it kind of comes out of nowhere because it's not as connected to your study as it could be. So after you finish your fantastic conclusion, you want to go back and you want to write your introduction. Now, your introduction is essentially showing your reader the big picture. This is not the abstract where you show your whole snapshot. This is the big picture kind of overview that you have before you get into the lit review and before you get into the rest of your paper. I love to start inspirational. I am mostly a qualitative research with a bit of quantitative mixed in. So I can start with quotes. I can start with inspiration. If you're in a different field, maybe statistics. Something that is going to grab your reader's attention and say, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, that's really reflective. Something that's going to keep them reading. You don't want to overthink the introduction. You want to get the reader's attention, state your position if applicable. Very, very brief lit review, maybe a couple of very key studies that you might focus on a lot more. And then you want to get into your research gap and then your overall study overview. And that's it. But you definitely want to make sure that you briefly address that research gap in your introduction as you start setting up your whole study. So this is a brief overview of the publication process and the different parts of the research paper. Luckily, I am in the process of developing a manual that should be out in the next couple of weeks, as well as an accompanying video to be able to expand upon some of the key areas of publication, such as, again, the lit review, synthesizing, and of course, quoting and paraphrasing and using APA or any style book that your journal requires appropriately. So make sure that you proofread, make sure you check APA formatting, and there are several sites to do that, and make sure that you cite quotations and paraphrases appropriately. As well as the final thing, if it's possible, write about what you are passionate about. Write about what you enjoy, write about things that you want to research, if it's possible. I know that in some cases we can't always write about everything that we're passionate about, but at least try to when you have a chance. If you can't write about what you're passionate about, hopefully make sure that the work that you do is important and make sure that it can contribute to the research conversation. So I want to close with a quote, and it says, first, organizing it on paper isn't just academic, it's an applied prerequisite for manifestation. And so it's very important that we are able to manifest our ideas and make them come alive and enjoy what we write if that's possible. Finally, we need important research from all around the world. If this symposium has taught us anything, it is that we need all of the research being discussed here and all of these amazing, innovative, invigorating, critical presentations. And we need them to be able to be distributed widely in manuscript publications. So I hope that this video is able to help you in that process. And I hope that I'll be able to read your research in different publications, including the journal that is being represented here. So in conclusion, please contact me. I have a LinkedIn. I also have an Instagram. I also, of course, have an email. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so very much. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world listening to this now. And take care. Goodbye.